So yeah, welcome to the Southeast Asia Law Network, and so today we have meet the industry expert. Um, what we'll be doing for this event is we'll be recording it to have it up on our YouTube channel so that a lot of people can watch it, because it is a Saturday and in our audience is in Singapore, Malaysia, the main bulk of audiences, and it's Saturday night, so it'd be better if they could watch it again because of the
Perfect.
time zone difference. And yeah, we have Azar Khan. Azar Khan, he's a energy consultant at SK Energy, which is an award-winning independent energy brokerage that helps businesses procure gas, electricity, and water contracts. So we'll be hearing his insights about the energy industry today. And Rachel, on to you.
Yeah, perfect. I'll just get started with the really great questions that our audience submitted to us. So just to start off with the basics, so Azar, would you mind telling us what you do more generally? Like, what is your job description?
No, of course, of course. As an energy consultant, our main priority is to procure electricity, gas, and water, as you mentioned. They as a from wholesale suppliers. Since these commodities are changing with markets on a daily basis, my strategy is to share the industry knowledge I have to allow customers to understand what they are paying for. So I think that's where the key lies, and that's where we try to differentiate ourselves. Energy, as we know, is an essential service, key to every aspect of modern life. We use gas and electricity to heat our homes, our businesses, our workplaces all the time. Power our phones, and now more so than often, our cars as well. If we just go for example on a British household, just the UK spends around £30 billion on gas and electricity a year. On average, that's £1,123 per household. Businesses, charities go up to 20 billion a year. So it's a huge industry. And as an unregulated industry, it's very important to have people who know the industry so they can, again, go back to my initial point of understand what they're paying for.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. In that's what we're holding these meet the industry experts events for as well. It's to help law students when they qualify. They need to understand what clients are thinking about when they're doing projects, cutting costs especially. Yeah, so that's it's very glad to have you here. So more on a more specific point, like what does a typical day for you look like?
A typical day. Wow, there's never 2 days the same, should we say? A prime example. Yesterday, my phone started ringing at about 8 a.m. in the morning, where a client didn't have any supply. So we deal with off-site supply demands as well. So we act as a extension to small businesses or large businesses in that sense, where they will pick up the phone, contact us, and we have our dedicated account managers within the suppliers, or should we say the generators, of energy, to make sure we are liaising with the correct department to resolve that matter. Thankfully, we managed to get that sorted quite quickly. By 11 o'clock in the morning, I was tendering for a new supply for one of the sites that we're looking at. That meant basically getting legal authority to work on their behalf, and what we regard as a letter of authority. With the new GDPR rules, we need to make sure we are compliant from that side as well. Otherwise, suppliers would not allow us to manage or look at any of the clients' data. So we get usage data from the existing supplier. We then get pricing details from the existing supplier, and then we go tender that out to the market. The UK holds just over 70 different suppliers. So the market is very vast. So you have suppliers who specialize in small businesses, suppliers who specialize in corner shops, should we say, and some who specialize in the high-end corporate side of the business, where they are large energy users. So depending on what the customer's scope is and what their requirements are, we then go to the market and try and get the best and most competitive price for them. All the meantime, dealing with the odd complaint from a supplier, dealing with the odd metering issue, dealing with the metering figures in what the customers used, and thankfully tying up my day about 8 p.m. in the evening. So literally, it's full throttle, should we say?
Yeah, of course. The client service is a essential part of any business, any service. You mentioned liaising with various departments. I'm just wondering what kind of parties are involved in your day-to-day work. Do you work with accountants a lot? Energy suppliers, I imagine, quite a lot as well.
Yes.
Any lawyers, government authorities? Like what kind of people do you deal with day to day?
It all depends on the level of inquiry that's come through. I've dealt with tenancy managers, landlords, suppliers, as you mentioned, on a regular basis. Small, large businesses, part and parcel. They will be more from the customer side more than anything else. We deal with the national grid, which are the maintenance of the grid lines. If there's any complaints or challenges with that, they need to make sure that's being maintained. And the odd lawyer and the odd solicitor would always step in when it comes to a large complaint, where clients have been missold, payment issues, debt collectors, wrongfully charged sites, which is a big push now in the UK because there's been a whole trend of site blocks. So you have a grid block of maybe 50 to 100 businesses. Sometimes they're all working off the same grid. And what you're getting now is that people are trying to rewire grids to supply their site off the neighbor's network. So you'd have one company paying for two sites essentially, and one company gets off with free. So the lawyers really just step in to make sure, first of all, the company is not affected in a negative way, and then to represent them in court where required. So yeah, it can vary depending on the level of service that is needed and the level of expertise that is needed. The energy market, like I mentioned, it's not regulated. So there's always a scope for different industries to get involved. An unregulated business, it's not safe, but it's creating a whole load of problems and challenges for the businesses involved. That's why having solicitors and lawyers at hand is so important and so key, because when you're not regulated, you need to make sure you're abiding by trading laws. And that's where solicitors can step in and say, right, this is trading law, this is that trading law. And then you have ownerships and legal responsibilities as well, which obviously a solicitor and lawyer can always add his speciality or her speciality to the industry.
That's very interesting. I didn't even know that the energy market was so unregulated. I think if lawyers are this is where lawyers come in, obviously, with their commercial knowledge when there's so little regulation around the energy industry. So my next question will probably be like, what would be a benefit of securing your services as an energy consultant for a company?
Well, there's various benefits to having, well, not just myself, but any energy consultant on your side, and that's the key to it. They need to be on your side. There's many rogue brokers out there because the energy industry isn't regulated, so everyone is quite fast to jump to try and make some quick money out of it. As you saw the figures, over 20 billion in in businesses worth of money being shared. If we look at stats of, for example, 2018, the school and service sector has paid over £1 billion in commission fees alone in one calendar year. That's just commission fees to suppliers. So it's a lot of money to be made. Now, why is it important to have a energy consultant or any energy broker? First and foremost, you have the freedom of the market. It's always, 95% of the time in the energy market, it's cheaper for you to change supplier, which is unfortunate. Suppliers expect customers not to hunt around because they don't have the time. If you and I were to go from a customer perspective, how many phone calls can you make in a day? Go through the sales process, give them your details, give them your account number, give them your business address, your usage details, your contractual terms, to try and get one price. That's not negotiable. And you wouldn't know, you and I, as a normal customer, wouldn't know the industry standard. So what the rate is today, as I mentioned earlier, the market fluctuates daily. There's so many things that go into market pricing. It's unbelievable. So you and I as a customer wouldn't know that. Now the suppliers know you don't know that. So when you go to a price, their market price will be 2-3p higher. It doesn't sound like much, but that can be the difference between £2,000-3,000 a year if you're a small to medium sized business, or even £2,000-3,000 a month if you're a large business. So from where I sit, we will go and first of all get that usage data to make sure it's correct. We validate everything before we start pricing. So as a customer, if we're referring to you, Rachel, as the customer, so you would get the industry standard price. So I would go fish the market and make sure we get as many prices that fit your requirements as possible. For example, if you wanted green energy, if you wanted a specific type of renewable energy, hydro, or you wanted wind, or you wanted solar, we can get that. We can make that happen. And then you had a specific type of business, as I mentioned. If it was a small or large business, there's certain areas that certain suppliers who specialize in that, we would narrow that down further. And then we would get a price from the selected few. Bring that price 5-10 suppliers. We do that within a day. For you to contact 20-30 suppliers to find out which one suits your requirements, we're talking at least 50 to 60 hours of work. I do that in a day, simply because of the supply relationships I have and the industry knowledge we have. So within a couple of days, you'll have that pricing in front of you. You make your decision based upon that. So not only is it competitive where you know you're getting a market rate, but you also know what you're paying for. Because as much as people say suppliers pay a broker, the broker makes money out of what price you're getting. Let me elaborate on that a little bit. The market base may be 14p. So energy generators generate electricity about 6p per kilowatt, if we're talking about electricity, and it'd be a 1.5p for gas. They will sell that at 14p per kilowatt for electricity. So you can already see the markup there is more than double. And they will sell that for about 2.5p for gas. So almost double there again. That would then go to the broker as a base rate. The broker, i.e. myself, would then put my markup on top of that. So not every broker would tell you that. Every broker would go, no, the supplier is going to pay us, and they will charge you 4p. Well, if you talk about gas, as an energy consultant, that's me using 1.5p of commission on every single time you turn on gas. So if you were to use 1,000 kilowatts of gas a year, that's just say £1,500 a year extra you're paying as commission fees without knowing, because you've compared the market with the quote you've had on the phone with your existing supplier. And as we know, every renewal quote is going to go up. That's just the way, unfortunately, we do business. When it comes to renewal, they're going to quote you a higher price. So I break that down for my client and say, right, this is the price we've got from the supplier, and this is the markup that I'm putting up on my side. And the markup is paid by the customer on a monthly basis, whether brokers like it or not. That's how it's paid. So you'd pay your bill, and the supplier would pay me. That's how we're paid. So having that knowledge and that breakdown, it also means that you can build trust. It also means you know the competitive of the market, and you know you've got a first-hand referrer. You can bounce things off me. I'm there over the phone because I'm independent. I give my mobile number to my clients. You know, it's not even an office line number, so they can pick up the phone to me at any time they want. They've got a direct line straight through to me. So it's not like a large supplier where you would be speaking to different people every time. I know the accounts I'm dealing with. I know the problems that they've had, the challenges that they had. I know what works for them. You do not need to explain it 15 times over to 15 different people and get 15 different answers. You know, it's clear, it's transparent, it's easy, and it's manageable, and they save money.
No, yeah, definitely. That actually sounds very similar to the job of, you know, a lawyer, a solicitor. That, you know, your clients are kind of like your child that you need to protect from these bullies that the energy market is just trying to extract the most out of them, and they don't know any better. And this commercial knowledge is very, very important.
They don't, and I think that's what's made me get into the role I'm in, because I was working for a supplier before. So I was managing brokers. So the supplier I was working for was Orsted. Now they're an electricity generator. 97% of the wind farms that you see on motorways and seashores across Europe are owned by Orsted and managed by Orsted. So renewable energy is where I was working in. So seeing the trends and works that other suppliers and brokers were using, it made me sick to my gut. I absolutely did not like it one bit. We developed a fair trading policy where we only allowed a specific amount of commission on some certain deals, but still some of the things that brokers were trying to push through was borderline robbery. And you looked at it and you spoke to them, you're like, guys, what are you doing? No, customers agreed to it. But it's not customers agreed to it, it's how you sold it. Have you told them you're charging them 4 or 5p of commission? Have you told them you're almost doubling their rate? Yeah, we told them. Have you really? You know, I'm not I I'm not a business person myself, in the sense I don't have my own premises that I own and I manage, and I don't have 15, 20, 50, 100 staff members. But anybody who comes to you and says, by the way, I'm just going to double your rate for you, is that okay? No one's going to say yes. They're going to think you're getting absolutely crazy. You know? And then they were like, yeah, and that's what encouraged me to step aside and say, right, no, there is the right way of doing business. There is a right way to help clients and add transparency to a very murky industry. And that's what I'm trying to do. It seems like a long mission, but I'm hoping one day we'll get there.
Yeah, that's really great. I think this ties in well with the next question. Azar, you want to take over?
Yeah, so what you have said echoes a lot with what a solicitor does as well, in terms of dealing with clients, breaking down the information and presenting it. So what would you say is like your most challenging aspect of your job?
Trying to not convince, trying to show that you're different from everybody else. You know, because it's an unregulated industry, the moment you speak to somebody, it's like there's a black cloud in front of them when they speak to you. You can, because they've heard everything that's been said, and they've heard all the sales jargon, and that's what it is. It's sales jargon. I could be saying this now, until I don't follow through with my action, it's impossible for anybody to know whether it's validated or not. And thankfully, my customers now can validate it. You know, at SK Energy, we have a 100% client retention ratio, so which is unreal for an energy broker, because we maintain our clients. Yes, we don't have 100% retention with that one supplier, which means, like I mentioned before, changing suppliers is always the best way. But having that lack of trust when you speak about energy, when you speak about gas, electricity, water, it's the biggest challenge that we have. And I'm hoping that with things like this, we're trying to add some clarity to the industry. We can try and break those barriers down.
No, that's fantastic. So will you say that, like, when you are reviewing energy contracts, so in terms of supplier side, what are some of like the red flags you look out for?
I like to call them agreements, not contracts.
All right.
The reason why I call them agreements, because that's how I present it to my client. Because a contract, it seems too binding for me. I like the customer to agree to what's going on. The basic red flags we look for is because we get a daily market update of what the industry standard pricing is. The first thing I look at is the market base. You know, what am I getting as a market base? After that, we look at standing charges. A lot of suppliers would give you a good market base rate, but the daily standing charge, which is like a maintenance fee, would be incredibly high. For the large electricity users, for example, you have a KVA as well, which is like a max output generation maintenance kind of charge. So if all your lights in your building were to go on at the same time, what's the maximum electricity output you would need for that one surge? For that whole energy output, you are charged a specific rate if you're using a certain amount of energy. We look at that to make sure that you're not being charged over the edge for that. We look at transportation charges of the energy from the grid to yourself to make sure that you're not being charged extra by the grid. Unfortunately, everyone tries to make an extra penny from here. So we got to make sure the whole line is corrected. Yes, we have our suppliers who do it, and we had that good relationship with them. So we have our preferred suppliers simply because they work on the same ethos as we do. That's always good. I'm sure as solicitors, I have my solicitors which I can bounce things off because I know they follow the same ethos. I'm not saying all solicitors are bad. Please don't quote me on that. And I'm not saying all solicitors are good. Everyone likes to make money, but it's how we make money that differentiates our ethos. So there is a variety of things that we need to make sure we break down the whole agreement. And where possible, we try to clarify with the supplier before we present it to the client. 80% of the time, I would say, when we request a base rate from a supplier, they are going to give us a base rate because they know we understand the industry. So they're not going to try and sneak any charges in. But still, suppliers have various rates in different areas. That in itself is a whole science because it depends on ownership of grid, where they've bought mass energy demand, because you have power plants throughout the whole country. So you may have a split power plant that's owned by 5 suppliers. The rest of the suppliers may not have a foothold, which means they need to buy the energy from those suppliers to then supply a specific site. So going directly may be cheaper for us. But for a third-party supplier, they would need to put their markup and then pay the base rate to that supplier. Hence why having our pool of 36 suppliers that we use gives us that freedom to go, right, who owns this majority of this grid, who owns the majority of that grid, and then we can try and negotiate that pricing.
Yeah, no, that's great that you have answered like the question about how you kind of choose the suppliers. In terms of, you say you have solicitors you deal with. What do you expect of your solicitors, and what do you kind of deal with with your solicitors?
For me, my solicitors, we have solicitors involved with every tenancy agreement. As you know, with tenancy agreements, they need to keep stepping and get involved, get the paperwork of that done. When we have any legal cases, the first thing I do before we submit a complaint direct to supplier is I'll put it past the solicitor and say, look, can you have a look at this to make sure we are approaching this in the correct way? They'd have a once over and add things where they feel legally the supplier may not have done his obligation. A lot of suppliers agreements over the phone. So legally we know that's binding, which means that they need to cover certain aspects of the agreement on the phone. Now, while I regard myself still learning, but still I'm good at what I do. There may be things that I miss, so I ping that phone call as well as the agreement, as well as the supply documentation that I have over to the solicitor and say, look, have a once over this. Have they met the legal requirements of the agreement? 80% of the time they haven't, which is good because it just means we can get our suppliers the deals that they need. And then we use them as a backing to support our case. Say, look, we've got solicitor X, Y, and Z who supported the case as well, and they've made ABC points to further bring home our complaint, and then it gets resolved. The moment you mention a solicitor and lawyer, unfortunately, suppliers don't like going down that route because it costs them a heck of a lot. Because not only would they have to compensate for the overcharges, they have to pay the rates and fees for the solicitors and lawyers. So we try to take that burden away from our clients as much as we can. So always having that springboard is good. Solicitors also get involved when we're buying new property. Some of my clients who want to go and purchase properties, I use my solicitors for those transactions as well, and give them business, and again give my clients a trustworthy hand where they can hold and make that purchase a success.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super interesting. Sorry, Azar, you were about
That
to
is
speak.
fine.
But it's really confusing with both of your names, but hopefully not too much. I just like to move on to the general market trends that exist in the energy industry now. As you know that the move towards renewable energy is it's very prevalent. You said yourself you worked at Orsted, which is a company that's completely transitioned into renewable energy now and completely abandoned their fossil fuel practice. I'm just wondering, do you see this trend increasing in the future? Do you see more companies completely abandoning fossil fuels? And in terms of the energy transition, it is quite a long-term process. So just wondering, what people don't usually think about the short-term challenges of it. So what do you think are the short-term challenges of these companies decarbonizing, basically?
See, I had this conversation with a friend of mine recently, and the biggest problem we're going to have is not only the energy that's being supplied to sites, it's the machinery we're using as well. Because some of the machinery is so outdated, the amount of excess fuel we're using in these areas is gonna generate. Yeah, don't get me wrong, using green energy, it's not carbon free. You know, you still have emissions. People get slightly mistaken when they think, oh no, we're using green energy, that means our emissions are zero. No, no, you still have emissions. So while we are good to go and move into green energy, we need to look at our processes as well as individuals, as individual businesses. And I think not as a country, but as a business, that's their first and most and biggest priority. Changing your energy supplier to a green energy supplier is good. The investment that had been done up to now with fossil fuels, something like this, it's a big challenge to then try and buy that market share. And while it's all good with the cost of solar energy coming really down, what happens next? All these solar panels that are getting renewed every 5 to 10 years, what happens with the old ones? How do you recycle those? Yes, we're making an incredible amount of wind farms, brilliant stuff. What about the plastic that goes into that? How are you going to recycle those? The whole process, you got to understand that while you had fossil fuels, the process of recycling is established. The new process needs to be developed as well. So the delay, I think, why it's a long-term plan is because they need to get this in place. Businesses can always switch to clean energy. That's not the problem. It's what happens once green energy becomes the first and prevalent source of energy throughout the country. When we had the lockdown initially, UK became self-sufficient for about 5 months. So the borders were all closed and everything like this. So the energy we had in UK was being self-generated. Fantastic news for UK. Brilliant, really was. But we were working only at a fraction of our running capacity. We were working about 30%. The other 70%, where is it going to come from? Now, that goes with every other country. The border agreements that we have with our neighboring countries for energy are so important. And the strains we've had with coronavirus and the strains we've had with Brexit now as well, that's going to affect everything. Because while we all want to go green, everyone wants to go green before the country next to them. So resources are going to become scarce, and then the cost of generating green energy is also going to become higher because everybody wants to do it. What that's going to do then is that's going to push the cost of recycling higher and push the cost of green energy higher. Yes, it costs less to generate it, but it's going to cost more to recycle it. It's going to cost more to make it. It's in the sense of your plants and things like this. So there's a lot to go on around there. But the challenges that the country faces are incredible. And I'm looking forward to the next few years to see how they go about it.
Sorry. Yeah, that's a really interesting insight. So you're saying that Brexit, with like the no deal becoming more and more likely,
Yeah.
you think energy prices are gonna drive like way up? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, we've seen that as a common thing. Whenever there's been a pull on finances, whether that's recession, whether that's COVID, energy prices have always been the first to fluctuate, as well as fuel costs. So because it's imported, it's not self-generated. So the reason why it was a rare scenario where UK prices dropped when coronavirus hit. The reason why it dropped was because we had so much excess energy. So at that point, all the generators were full. So they were trying to sell it to try and not make that loss. Yes, it's gonna, like I mentioned, you have power points, supply points within each area. So within that area, they were reducing the price so that they can get it to local businesses rather than trying to ship it across the other side of the country. But the bigger problem we're going to have is with Brexit is that the supply lines, for example, Norway, for example, Belgium, for example, Germany, for example, Middle East, Russia, and all these things, they're going to be disrupted massively. Now, how the industry deals with that, it's going to cost money, because if we don't have a trade deal, it means they can charge us whatever they want, and we have to pay. We can't shut down our energy and say that we're not going to do business. Now we're going to go and try and make our own energy. That's going to take a number of years before that happens. So between now and that time, we have to pay. So it's going to be a challenge in itself, and I can expect the prices just to go higher and higher.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that point. So in terms of, our international contracts, international supplies are disrupted, to say the least. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the government's new 10-point plan that Boris Johnson introduced? Like, do you think it's achievable? Are we going to be the next, Saudi Arabia of wind? Do you think the UK can be self-sufficient in this aspect?
I think the UK in itself is in the best position to do that, simply because of we're a small island. For a larger country, for a larger state, it would be a lot higher. We're surrounded by water, and as surprising as it is, hydro energy is just recently being pushed into the market. It's becoming more and more prevalent. If we can use that, we don't need to touch anything. We don't need to go abroad for anything. As a matter of fact, we can sell energy across the border, because we're an island. We're surrounded by water on all four fronts. Even our wind farms that are out on sea, it makes it so easy for us to do it, and it's our land, so we don't need to pay no one to try and do that. So I can see the UK doing that, and the 10 steps, they're not impossible to achieve. Yes, they could challenge you with everything that we do. Nothing comes easy, but I can see that being very achievable, and I hope we are the next Saudi Arabia in energy generation. It'll give me job satisfaction, and it'll give me job stability as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. All right. So, well, as an energy consultant, you probably deal with more than just domestic energy prices. You deal with internationally as well. Yeah. So with that, I guess my question would be, what countries do you think fare better in terms of their renewable energy progress, and they're keeping their energy prices low and affordable to private companies, especially? What do you think?
I mean, I don't really have a specific list of countries to go through and say, right, we're getting X from this country, X from that country. But generally, when our Norway and Belgium chains have restricted, that's been the biggest effect on our pricing. When Russia's been affected, it does affect our pricing, not as much, but I think it's because we're closer to these countries than we are Russia. In terms of international progress, then the Middle East is by far doing a lot on it. You must have seen recently that the full solar powered, energy, the football stadiums that you have in Qatar and things like this is unbelievable. They use zero energy in sense of electrical grid. They're totally off grid. And And I think that's where I see the benefit coming, and standalone difference between one country to the next. How many businesses can we become, or can we make self-sufficient with their solar reliability and the solar panels we can put on there?
Perfect. All right. I do have one more question before I let
Sure.
Azhar take over. Yeah. Earlier you mentioned that you as a you as an energy consultant, you have to make sure that you are GDPR compliant. I'm
Yeah.
just wondering, I never made the connection, what kind of issues does the energy market or energy consultants deal with in terms of data privacy and GDPR?
I mean, you first and foremost, you have a client's contact details. So they're a trading commodity in the market. So people can buy supply details in the sense of their number, when the supply agreement starts, when it finishes. The reason for that is they can sell that on to energy brokers such as myself, who then make those calls and try to get those agreements for themselves. Another more pressing matter is why the should we say the letter authorities were brought into play. Well, what we had is third-party agreements. So the supplier was agreeing contracts. I'll say contracts because this was a contract. It was not an agreement. The contracts on behalf of the customer without the customer having any notice of what's going on. So they would get an invoice and a renewal through the post saying, thank you for agreeing your renewal with X, Y, and Z. And they would look at it and think, hey, I've not agreed nothing. It's because they had spoken to a supplier who had previously agreed an agreement with them. And on their renewal, they've just added an X amount of commission for themselves and then submit that customer for another 3 to 5 years. So the customer can't do nothing because on the old rules, that was okay. On the new rules, they need written confirmation from the client. And a lot of suppliers are now not taking supplier-based agreements. What I mean with that, I could not sign a contract on behalf of a customer. That needs to be signed by the customer. I know from the side of solicitor, it's always the customer has the final say, and you need that. Unfortunately, the energy industry only recently has brought that into play, which is really strange because you think, hang on, the whole country runs off energy. Why are the most basic of principles not in play? Because there was always someone to benefit out of it. Suppliers benefited out of it because they got a customer renewal without having to go out and do any work. And brokers benefited from it because they got commission out of a deal which they don't need to get customers' confirmation. Two parties are happy. The only party that missed out, where's the customer? So
Right.
thankfully, we had the national governing body step in and say, right, it needs to be done this way, and they've stepped up their game, which is really, really good.
Yeah, thank you.
No problems at all.
So yeah, I would just ask the next question, which is about the pricing in the industry again.
Sure.
So you said that the prices of renewable energy is not confirmed that it will be going down anytime soon because of how the whole supply chain works.
Sure.
And then you said that the UK itself can be a producer of a lot of renewable energy because of we are an island and we can be self-sufficient. But how do you think the low oil prices? So oil prices they fluctuate in terms of what's happening in the Middle East. They might push it down all the way. We don't know how low it can go. How do you think this would slow down the move towards renewable sources of energy?
I think it help in a strange way, because it means that transportation of goods becomes cheaper, because oil, we know, is used to transport a lot of things, whether it's cars, whether it's planes, whether anything like this. So if we are able to transport things cheaper, it means that we can reduce the bottom line cost of our energy. Whenever you see the energy price, or the oil prices, it's a good indicator as to what the energy prices are doing. So whenever you go to, I don't know, in UK BP or Shell or anything like this, if it's dropped by 2p, the energy market has dropped. If it's increased, the energy market is increased. It works in a roundabout way where they affect one another, and it will be amazing to see a drop in energy and fuel prices. And yeah, 97p per every gallon of fuel we put into our cars in UK is tax anyway. So if the government is going to reduce its tax, perfect. We benefit from having less energy prices and less fuel prices. But up till then, I think our fuel prices are going to stay quite consistent.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of companies, so which companies have proven difficult to transform or limit their energy capacity and consumption?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Which companies have proven difficult to?
In terms of Rachel, do you want to clarify?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, we've got a question from the audience here. Jeff here wants to ask which companies have proven to be difficult in transforming or limiting their energy capacity. I think this is more in terms of transforming into renewable energy, as in like which companies, what type of companies would be more resistant towards
What we're talking,
transforming.
people who don't like change. When you talk about green energy to somebody who's been doing something a specific way, imagine somebody who's been a customer for British Gas in the past 15 years. They set up their business. They were a British Gas customer for home. I'm just using British Gas as an example. Nothing against British Gas, by the way, guys. I just know they're a well-known company. So the British Gas customer at home, British Gas customer for their business, and it's working fine. They have no need to change. You talk about green energy and you talk about saving them costs. We're like, no, hang on, wait. My business is working fine. I'm not affecting nobody. I'm not involved in what you guys do. I don't care about global warming. A lot of people still don't believe that global warming is an issue and a challenge for the world. So while it's all good and well, we're talking about green energy, trying to set these incentives, green energy. The government seems also doing it. These businesses will wait till the last second before they have to change to a green energy supplier. And British Gas do green energy, by the way. But the customer would just not go to green energy because they're so used to doing things in this specific way. They don't want to see a tariff name change because for them, it's, oh my gosh, I've agreed something I don't understand. While it's exactly the same, it just means green. But for them, it's the way they are comfortable running their business. And that's a big challenge we have in all industries where change becomes scary because we're so, like, especially in a time with COVID, people are afraid of so many different things. Adding a new thing to be afraid of, global warming, we know it's been there for a while, but adding that to the thing, it only puts people into a more of a reserved shell where they don't want to speak about things they don't understand. And that comes back to my first and foremost point, is that if we can develop that trust and say, look, it's not to try and change your business, it's to try and make you more compliant to the changes that are coming through into the industry. And that's why I'm going about this whole image of the way I like to do business is develop a relationship, develop trust, develop, that we are working from their side, not from the supplier side. And that's the way I think the key would come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people always really neglect the change management part of a transition. Azar, do you want to ask a question?
All right, yeah. So in terms of, we've talked about the companies that do not like change. So what are some of the clients that love to see a change to renewable energy, if there are any of those clients that exist?
I have some of my clients who literally would jump to anything new. They ask me, "Oh, is anything new in the market? Is anything new in the market?" Because they're so proactive, and it's a really good corporate, should we say, marketing for them as well. Though they are involved in the latest green tech. Unfortunately, it's not that easy to change suppliers or say change their technology on a regular basis, because once you commit to something, you have to kind of. It's not like the home industry where you are able to change on a regular basis your supplier. The commercial side is once you agree something, you have to carry out your term of your agreement, unless something happens to the supplier. But yeah, we have some people who are very proactive in the market. Solar panels, LED lighting, LEDs in the car parks, LEDs in the roads. Some of them are really, really, really good. And it's a breath of fresh air to see such a drive coming from them, because sometimes they're selling my services to them, if you get what I mean. I don't need to do no sales pitches. I don't need to explain the market to them, because they come to me saying, Azar, I know this. I'm like, yep, should we do it? Yeah, cool, let's do it. So from that side, it's absolutely fantastic. And we need to try and, I think the way we can do it as individuals and try and spread that is follow those the good things in the market, the good works of people in the market, where we are doing actively promoting a safer and greener world, where we are promoting climate change, where we are doing, let's support those incentives, let's support them by adding, sharing, and sharing what our thoughts as well. And if we know someone good, let's share the complete details. We're in a social media world right now, and a new pair of trainers comes out, everyone knows about it. But trainers don't affect nobody. A new tech that comes out affects everybody's livelihood. What's happening tomorrow, our children, our grandchildren, everything like this. And that's how we need to look at it. We need to look at the long game, as Rachel mentioned earlier. We do need to look at the long game. It's a scary moment to be in COVID and look at the long game with positivity, but we need to use that. We need to try and get away from our little holes and think, you know what, the world is bigger than just me and you. What we do on a small scale, it really does affect on a big scale. Changing our LED lights to LED at our home, you may reduce the global footprint by 0.00001%. But if 1 million people do that, we increase it by 1%. And that on a global scale is massive.
Oh no, that's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much. I'll hand it back to Rachel for the last few questions.
Yeah, I think we're just about to run out of time here, so I'll ask one last question. This is something that I personally really want to know about. Is that there's talk of a no deal Brexit. So earlier in the year, I think they were talking about how if they were going to stay in the UK, it was going to be a standalone UK carbon emissions trading system. But if there's a no deal Brexit, it would go to a carbon tax, a carbon emissions tax. Since this latter is more likely now, how do you think a carbon emissions tax might affect your clients?
Because I was working for a supplier, we were talking about a carbon emission tax. Which is a bit funny. If you step back and take a look at it, you're like, hang on, wait, how did a supplier know of a carbon emission tax before the government released it? Because the suppliers are leading it, not the government. As thing as that sounds, and probably suppliers might not like me for it, but I'm going to say it how it is. It's interesting because I don't think that tax is necessary. It puts an extra financial burden on suppliers. Recently, I don't know whether you're aware, we had a price increase every year. The home energy system goes through a price evaluation from Ofgem to say, look, are we going to increase the prices this year or not? September, they announced a price increase. September, October, November, there was a massive uproar saying, how can you increase prices on a home basis when people are out of work? People are struggling to pay their basic necessities and basic bills. And in November, they decided that, okay, no, we're not going to do a price increase. So there's always someone there trying to make the extra money out of it. I do believe if they have enough voices shared and brought forward to say, it doesn't make sense, you're only going to put more financial burden on people, which is then going to close down more businesses, which is then going to restrict the energy use, which is then going to put a financial burden on the whole country because there'll be more people out of business. If they looked at the long game again, they'll be like, okay, look, on your next renewal, if you didn't do it, then we can have a conversation. But they're going to do a blanket. I know what they're going to do. They do a blanket line a week before and say anybody who's not in green energy is going to be charged a fine. And that's the way they like to do things. And everyone's going to come and panic, and then people are going to pay extra money to try and get out of the fines because the fines are going to be extortionate. And they're going to try and cancel their agreements, and the suppliers are going to have a field day. The customers and brokers such as myself are going to be absolute pulling our hair out because I think, hang on, wait, you could have given so much notice, but you did it a week before. I could go on official record for that. I think they're going to literally release it a week before. What I'm trying to do with my customers now is put every single customer I deal with on a green energy plan. It doesn't cost more. As a matter of fact, in a lot of cases, it's cheaper. And it just means that if there was a scenario where this happened overnight, these customers are safe. You know, there's no extra financial burden. There's no shocks to the bill. They can maintain a price in the long term. What suppliers are doing, however, they're making the 1 year price very, very competitive. The 2 year price, okay, and the 3 year price quite extortionate, because they don't want people to commit to 3 year. Because in 2 years' time, when UK recovers from the COVID and the Brexit, they can renegotiate pricing at a much higher rate, because the base rates are going to fly up. And they're going to say base rates have gone up because the supplier deals coming in from Europe are no longer there. We're having to generate our own energy, and you're being charged a surcharge now for green energy. So where your pricing was, for example, 15p, we're going to charge you 18p because we can. And that brings everyone to an unfortunate halt, and we struggle to pay the price. We struggle to pay the basic bills.
Wow, that was such an insightful answer. Let me just say, like, well, obviously, as much as I want to continue this conversation, we are just about out of time. But thank you guys so much for attending this event. Obviously, I'm sure our audience really, really appreciates the insights that you've given both from, you know, the energy consultancy side and from, you know, the supplier side from your experience. If you guys know any businesses that, you know, very possibly, very likely are being overcharged for their energy, go ahead, direct your business over to Azar. Obviously, a very, very intelligent, insightful, experienced energy consultant. But for now, we really thank you for your time, Azar. Right, Azar, any concluding remarks?
No, I just thank you so much, Az, for getting on the call with us and giving us your insights. And thank you to our attendees as well. They've been asking questions. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was absolute pleasure. And if there's anything anyone needs to know, any questions that you have, by all means, fire them across, and I'll do my best to try and help and share whatever I know and wherever I can help. But thank you again, Azar. Thank you, Rachel. Really appreciate your time, and it was lovely speaking to you guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Everyone have a good evening.
Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so